Welcome to the details video for the sale of my moss green 1986 Porsche 928S. Well, there's a lot you can tell from photos. A video tells a more detailed story. So I want to cover all the details of this car in this video to give anyone that's interested in purchasing this roaring slice of Porsche history a more complete picture, particularly for those that cannot travel to see or drive the car in person. This video will be broken into 5 parts: external cosmetics, internal cosmetics, mechanical, electrical, and finally we'll take it for a quick spin. But first of all, a bit of my history with the car, which has not been long. I purchased it back at the beginning of June this year. I paid $36,000. I've always loved the look of the first gen 928, and this car was in pretty good shape for its age when I got it, and I just loved the colour. Subsequently, I have been willing to spend additional cash to further restore it both cosmetically and mechanically. In the last 4 months, I've spent an additional $7,000 on cosmetics, including a front end repaint, detailing, trim replacements, etc. And another $6,000 has also been spent on mechanical and electrical work to bring the car up to its current state and condition. It was never my intention to sell the car so quickly. However, personal matters mean that I'll be out of the country for a while, and I have a new project, my 993, that I'm working on, so someone else will benefit from the love that has been lavished on this beautiful green V8 machine. Okay, so starting on the outside with external cosmetics, and up front, I'd like to point out that while this has had a front end repaint and a full body paint correction, this car is still 34 years old. And so there are little nicks, scratches and imperfections as you would expect on a car of this vintage. I will try and zoom in and point out all of them. But just walking around, it really looks like it's in great shape, and certainly wherever I take this car, a small admiring crowd always seems to form. People love the shape of the 928 and they really seem drawn to this colour combination. So as I said, the complete front end has been repainted and they did a great job of blending it into the doors so it looks consistent. The most prominent remaining blemish is right here on this right hand pillar. These scratches are a few inches long, not too bad, but I wanted you to see them because they don't really show up in photos that well. Further down the passenger door there's also a few other little marks. And over here the passenger mirror has been scraped at some point. All the rims and tyres are in great condition, as you'd expect. And as you'd expect, the front of the car is in as new condition, with new rubber seals. I have also replaced the rubber seal that sits behind the hood Porsche badge. I also replaced the original fixed beams with new LED fixed beams. They look original, but now you can actually see at night. Let me pop up the lights so you can see the condition of the fixtures. Some small chips in this mirror as well. Continuing around to the driver's side door, there's also some small marks just on the edges here. There is a little blemish that's hard to see just right here. The back rims and tyres also in excellent condition. Here's the exhaust and rear lights. Now there are some very small marks just along this rear lip. And I've replaced the rear wiper here. Actually, we'll take a quick look in the inside of the back here while we're here. Let me pop up the trunk. It's all pretty clean back here. Now the one thing I want to point out is there's a blemish in the paint here somewhere. Just a little spot that's darker in some lights for some reason. Otherwise, all down here is good, and as you can see the license plate lights both work. But tucked in over here are some more little paint chips. And over here is the fuel cap, that's all good. Also a couple of scratches down here. And finally the fourth tyre and rim are also all good. I also wanted to point out there's some little scratches in the glass from the window going up and down. I also have replaced the window rubbers on both sides. And the sunroof seal was replaced by the previous owner back in March. The sunroof and roof are also in perfect condition. While we're on the doors, I've also replaced the weather seal rubber on both doors. We also did a bunch of paint thickness measurements around, and it's fairly consistent. There's no signs that it's had any bodywork done. So overall, while the exterior still needs a little bit of work here and there, it is in pretty great condition overall. I personally just adore the shape of the 928, and this moss green colour, oh, I love it. Onto the internal cosmetics. The interior was looking pretty dirty when I got this car, and it is cleaned up nicely thanks to Darien Detail. However, once again, it is not perfect due to the age of the car, and the most noticeable wear is here on the driver's seat. If we zoom in, you can see the piping has broken away. Otherwise, the chocolate part of the dash has been replaced at some point, so it is in good condition. There's also a bit up here that needs gluing down again. Down here, ashtray. Glove box. Otherwise, the interior is a nice contrast to the exterior colour. Oh, and this passenger seat has a little bit of stitching coming away. Viewing from the other side, you can see it's looking pretty tidy. I think to make this car perfect you would need to reupholster the interior, but for its age it's pretty decent. And another quick look in the rear, which is also cleaned up quite nicely. So onto the mechanics of the car, and I'm going to split this into two parts. Everything that was done before I purchased this car, and everything that I've had done while I've owned this car. And the good news is that this car was in perfect running order when I purchased it, and that really comes down to the amount of work that was done on the car just before I purchased it by the previous owner. And I've gone through his receipts, and he spent a decent amount of money replacing stuff that is mostly, aged out, things that just wear out over age as opposed to mileage, to bring this car up into good mechanical shape. So going through his list of receipts, I've seen that he's done the timing belt, the accessory belts, the water pump, the mass airflow sensor. Those are all done in February. In March he did the fuel injectors and the fuel pump. He also replaced the sunroof seals and lubricated all the machinery in the sunroof. He got the air conditioning recharged with R134A, which is the legal standard. He had the valve cover gaskets replaced. He also replaced the bushings and control arms, as you can see here in this video. And he did the brakes and rotors where necessary. There's also a whole bunch of small electrical issues that he had fixed or replaced, which I'm not going to go through one by one. Needless to say, all of the electrical items in the car work, as you'll see in the next segment. Now, onto what I've done while I've owned this car, and this really came down to, while everything was working, I took the car into Porsche of Fairfield to have them do a professional pre-purchase inspection. So they went over every inch of the car and made recommendations to me as to what should be replaced because it's either aging out or it's looking worn or it's causing some minor issue with the car. But overall it's pretty tidy.
Yeah,
no major.
Pretty good. You know,
yeah.
we should adjust the front wheel bearings. We should replace those inner tie rods.
Yep.
And of course, then it's going to take an alignment after that because we're going to affect the toe.
Right.
And then, you know, do all the rest of the little stuff.
Yep.
So I've got written down. You know, wheel bearing adjust.
Yep.
The brake harnesses, inner tie rods, the clamps, or whatever clamps we're going to do there. Swap the wheels. Lube the hood release, and of course replace that piece.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to mess around with the washer next.
And they made 7 recommendations, no, 8 recommendations, and I did 6 of them and refused 2 of them. So starting with the 2 that I refused, and why. The first one was the washer reservoir, which they recommended I replace, but they couldn't get the part, so we just didn't bother. It needs to be found secondhand. It's just the washer reservoir is starting to age out. It's old plastic, but it still works, so that's fine. And the second one was the wiring harness for the brake lines. What this is not that important. It's the wiring that tells the car when the brake pads are starting to get low. And it still works and it's still in place. It's just, you know, it's old wires, and sooner or later they'll crack and break, and then the car will no longer have that sensor. So it's not a big deal. They were going to charge me $1,800 to rebuild that, so I didn't think it was worthwhile when they were still working perfectly fine. The stuff that I did do is, both with Porsche Fairfield and separately, I've had the radiator replaced, so all new radiator there, and the hood insulation, which is just this foam stuff up on the hood here, has all been replaced. The rubber boots on the drive shaft were starting to wear, so all 4 axle boots have been replaced. There was a little bit of play in the front wheels, so they recommended the inner tie rods and boots be replaced, so they were all replaced as well. And the car got a wheel alignment. So that covered off all the important stuff in the pre-purchase inspection, so I'm pretty happy now that the car's in good, safe driving condition, and that shows. As you'll see when I drive the car later in this video, it drives very, very well. Okay, on to the electrical, and I know what you're thinking. This should be an interesting ride. An 80s German car. What could possibly go wrong? Well, surprisingly, everything works at the moment on this car. But we'll go through it, starting with passenger's window up and down, driver's window up and down, sunroof, sunroof, come on, sunroof, there we go, sunroof open, and sunroof closed, the all-important rear wiper, front fan, and if I start the car, the AC works and blows cold, and this car comes strangely optioned with the rear air conditioning system as well, and it's a whole separate set of controls for the rear air conditioning, and it's particularly strange because no one ever fit into those rear seats. Mirrors, both sides, work. Rear defroster works. Headlights work, there they go, popping up. And the fog lights, let me pop out and show you those. And of course the indicators and hazard lights, I'll show you those as well. There's 1, there's 2, all around the front. There's 3, there's 4. And the wipers work as well, and the squirters. I've just put new wiper blades on this car. The cruise control, I actually don't know whether that works. It makes clicking sounds. We'll have to give it a try when we're driving. And here's one of the big highlights, is that I've changed out the stereo to a modern Blaupunkt that it does all the modern things, but still looks period correct. I love this stereo, it works so well. Yeah, AM, FM, and of course I can also do Bluetooth streaming. and that works beautifully well. And yeah, the power of this system just makes it sound like a modern stereo system, but of course you can do all the streaming from your phone and whatever. And it's also got a phone kit on it as well, which is actually very clear, so you can be a true 80s yuppie and take phone calls in your Porsche 928. There's also slots there for SD cards and USB if you want. But yeah, I just love the way it looks, and it's so beautifully functional as well. It just really adds something to this car. Down to the left is, this button doesn't work. This is the fader button for the original stereo. It's all wired up. The wires all still work. If you put the old stereo in, it would probably work. And this is the trunk release. There's one on both sides and they both work. There's also all the lights in this car all work. Let me demonstrate them. They all work. There's one in the back as well. The power door locks work, like so. And the horn works. I don't know what it is about 80s Porsches, but they have the coolest sounding horns. The park brake works really well on this car, and this car's got the 8-way seats. So let me demonstrate that. That's forward and back, up and down at the front, up and down at the back, and recline and forward. Forward and back, up and down at the rear, and forward and back, recline. All works. On top of that, all of the gauge lights works as well, and the gauge cluster lights up at night correctly. It even has an immobilizer alarm in it, which also works in this car, no problem. Okay, let's take the 928S for a spin. So when this was brand new in 1986, this was the fastest car you could buy in America, fastest production car in America. So you can imagine what a thrill it must have been driving this car off the lot. And even today, you know, it still stacks up pretty well performance-wise to modern cars. Yeah, it's a pretty cool car to drive. The hardest thing about driving this car is the gearbox. The gearbox, obviously a dogleg gearbox, the Porsche racing gearbox, the second and third. The first is down, second, third, fourth, fifth, so it takes a little while to get used to that. But once you've got that sorted, it's pretty straightforward. It's a regular manual gearbox car. Let's move the seat forward a little bit here. Okay, so we're going to pop her in first. Head out into the traffic here. Clutch in, into second. And she pulls hard. Yeah, it's amazing. When you think about it, you think about what a 5-litre V8 produced back in 1986. Most of them were producing between 160 to 190 horsepower. Not this car. Yeah, it must have been a revelation at the time that Porsche was producing so much horsepower from their 5-litre V8s. Yeah, it really put the American engines to shame, I guess. But even today, you know, it pulls hard. But once you get going and once you're in top gear, she's just a smooth cruiser. See, just over 2,000 RPM at 70 miles an hour. And of course, because this car's just had wheel alignment and balancing and all the bushings and rods and everything done, as you can imagine, she tracks pretty straight. If I drop it down, back into fourth, put my foot down. Oh, I'm getting overtaken by an old Jag. I tell you, this is the only Porsche I've ever driven where everybody waves. Everybody just seems to love the shape of this car, or maybe it's the color of the car. I get a lot of waves in this car. But yes, it's going back to the way it tracks here. It tracks beautifully straight, no wobble in the steering wheel. Yeah, she drives pretty smooth, this thing. That Jag is just dragging me off. So cruise, now let me drop it down a few gears and we'll punch it. So back down to 4th, which is, yeah, this is the strange thing, going, pushing the gear lever up to go to 4th, and then down to 3rd, and away we go. Woo, mama! Yeah. Yeah, imagine being a rich 80s executive cruising around in this thing. It must have been quite an experience. Oh, one more thing before I go. I think I've forgotten to mention the mileage. The current mileage on the car is 39,700. And the car comes with a few little bonus extras. The first one being this copy of GQ magazine from November 1986 when this car was made. It's the Harrison Ford edition, which ironically is how to look great at any age. The car also comes with 2 additional sets of floor mats, all 4 floor mats. The first one being a brand new set of Porsche floor mats, which I purchased for the car but haven't needed because the original floor mats have actually scrubbed up pretty well. And another set of very 80s multicolored floor mats, which came with the car when I got it. So there you go, you're getting 4 times 4 times 4, 12 separate floor mats when you buy this car, and the GQ magazine, and a contraceptive device that I found in the car as well.